Hi, Christina.
I've got the request to unmute, but I can't hear anyone. No, no one on our team can hear anything.
Cynthia, why don't you ask him if he has anything to say, and you will have to type any questions or responses back from us in the chat to him.
I can hear you now, actually. Sorry to interrupt. I can hear you now. It just came on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can't hear him.
Oh,
Really? Still nothing?
You may wish to make any comments, Cynthia, can you ask them that? first?
Okay. Can you hear me, Kyle?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Do you have any comments?
I didn't hear any of the proceedings, so I'm not sure. I did see the recommendation. Is it a recommendation for deferral?
Can you hear me, Kyle?
I can. Yeah. Can you hear me?
He says yes, but you can't hear him then.
Okay, yeah. Do you have any?
Ask him in the chat.
I didn't hear any of the proceedings, so I'm not sure. I did see the recommendation. Is it a recommendation for deferral?
No, it's not a recommendation for deferral.
It's not a recommendation for deferral.
It's just an information
There's a
report.
little delay in that too.
Is there anybody on the public that would like to speak on this application? Seeing none, is there any member of council that has any issues? Councilor Rose.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just noticing that there's already a bunch of buildings that have been built. And the variance application is coming after the buildings have been built. So I'm just wondering when this was noticed and why this wasn't dealt with during the original plan. I was just noticing.
The building permits that have been issued are not affected by the minor variance applications, other building clusters that have yet to have an application filed.
Oh,
I have a question. So what is the minimum, what are they're asking for a variance so that they can be closer together, correct? The buildings
So the eaves,
or the eaves?
the eaves are allowed to encroach into a required side yard by up to 0.3 meters. They are seeking up to 0.42 meters encroachment.
Why?
Would it be their truss design would cause the overhang?
Yes, so the overhang, so they're basically building the buildings, so the side walls of both sides of the building when they construct 2 units. They'll be built to the extent of the setback. And then our zoning bylaw only permits for an encroachment of 0.3 meters, taking into consideration that typically we only have 1 roof overhanging. But in this situation, because we have 2 buildings, I apologize, I'm gonna take my hand off the mic for a minute. We have 2 buildings like this, and then we have 2 roofs that are cantilevering into that setback. So that's why our zoning bylaw only accounts for 1. But in this situation, and when we did the site plan back in 2018, we didn't know what the roof configuration was going to look like. So instead of offsetting the buildings further apart, they're still meeting the zoning bylaw from the setback perspective of between the buildings. It's just the roof overhang from the truss is going to encroach into the required side yard setback more than 0.3 because we have an overhang on both sides.
Okay, thank you. No further council questions, Councilor Rowland.
Madam Mayor, through to the CBO. I'm just wondering what additional fire safety provisions are required in this situation?
So there'll be calculations that have to be done to determine what the setback is. So if they are required to put some fire stopping in, they may have to put in some gypsum or some sort of fire stopping in the where the roof and the wall meet in between each of those cavities, as well as they may have to provide soffit protection. Again, not something that is not typical in construction like this, but something we will definitely review during permit stage when we have 2 units being built side by side.
Any further questions? Okay, and can I have the motion? Councilor Rossi.
Myself and by Council Roll, PD report number 15-2023 be received, and that all comments and correspondence proceeded through the consultation process and returned to staff for consideration. The future report to the committee on the disposition of the matter.
All those in favor? Yeah, thank you. And Councilor Rossi? Nothing. Yeah. Yes. No. Nice job.
All right.
Cynthia, you let me know when you can proceed. Report number 7.3, report number PD 16/2023, consent and minor variance application for 80 to 90 Piper Street, file NOS B 0223, A 0223, and A 0323. Notice has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. The Secretary Treasurer will record everyone who has commented on this application, attended and or have registered with the Clerk's Division to attend the meeting this evening. Those individuals will be notified of the decision on or the convening of future meetings. And again, there's a sign-in sheet, so please don't forget to sign in. I'd now like to introduce Christina Glasnow, the planner and GIS technician, who will be presenting the application. Christina, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following presentation is for consent application B 02/23 and minor variance applications A 02/23 and A 03/23 located at 88-90 Piper Street. The purpose of this meeting is to provide an overview of the proposal, to solicit comments, and identify issues or matters to be assessed by staff. The property is located east of the intersection of Piper Street and Walter Street. The property has a lot frontage of 23.8 meters onto Piper Street and is approximately 2,443 meters squared in size. The property consists of 2 semi-detached dwellings, and surrounding land uses are primarily residential. The property is zoned Z5 urban residential and Z12 open space under General Zoning Bylaw 689-83 and is designated urban residential and ancillary and open space in the Township Official Plan. The property is also listed on the Municipal Heritage Registry. The subject property consists of split zoning, including Zone Z5 urban residential and Zone 12 open space. The white dashed line in the figure on the right differentiates the 2 zone classifications. As per section 6.32.2I of the General Zoning Bylaw, where a lot consists of more than 1 zone, each portion of the lot shall be considered a separate lot. Therefore, based on this definition, the property has the following lot areas. Zone 5 is approximately 915 meters squared, and Zone 12 is approximately 1,528 meters squared. The applicant proposes to sever the existing residential lot that consists of 2 semi-detached dwellings along the common wall to create 1 new residential lot and separate ownership of each semi-detached dwelling. The yellow dashed line in the photo indicates the proposed severance line, and the white dashed line again indicates the zone boundary. The proposed lot width is 12.28 meters for the retained lot and 11.8 meters for the severed lot. As shown in the previous slide, the property is defined as 2 separate lots and must meet the lot requirements of each zone classification. As per that previous definition, the proposed lot area is 464 meters squared for the retained lot and 451 meters squared for the severed lot. The applicant has also applied for 2 minor variance applications to accommodate the change in lot area, lot width, and the side yard setback for both the retained and severed parcels. The applicant seeks the following 3 variances for each lot. Section 8.3.1 of General Zoning Bylaw 689-83 establishes a minimum lot area of 1,000 square meters for the Zone 5 classification. The applicant requests a lot area of 464 meters squared for the retained lot and 451 meters squared for the severed lot. Section 8.3.2 of General Zoning Bylaw 689-83 establishes a minimum lot width of 24 meters for the Z5 zone classification. Applicant requests a lot width of 12.28 meters for the retained lot and 11.8 meters for the severed lot. And lastly, section 8.3.3B of General Zoning Bylaws establishes a minimum side yard setback of 2.4 meters. The applicant requests a side yard setback of 0 meters, and this would be along the common wall of the 2 semi-detached dwellings. This is a view of the subject property from Piper Street. 90 Piper Street is shown on the left and 88 Piper Street is shown on the right. There have been no comments or concerns from any members of the public at this time. There were no concerns from the GRCA, Fire Department, or Engineering or Public Works. Canada Post indicated that mail delivery would be via PO box at the post office. The building department requires the owner or applicant to obtain a professional to review the party wall and front and rear decks between the semi-detached dwellings. The building department also requires fire separation and fire resistance rating construction details. The Region of Waterloo requires the regional consent fee of $350 and the submission of a Section 59 notice. As the property is listed on the Municipal Heritage Registry, the proposed application was presented to the Heritage Advisory Committee on September 29th, 2022. The Heritage Advisory Committee did not have any concerns with the proposed application. Staff recommends that all comments and correspondence received from members of the public and government agencies through the consultation process be returned to staff for a future report to the committee on the disposition of this matter. Staff will be considering matters including all comments and correspondence received, further review of the fire separation along the common wall of the two semi-detached dwellings, whether this development meets the criteria of the 4 tests, if the proposal is desirable for the property and compatible with surrounding land uses, and the suitability of land for the purposes of which lands are to be severed, including setbacks and areas of the proposed lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. For those that have just come in, if you would like to sign the sign-in sheet on the one that you are here to talk about or just hit listen to, so that we can, any further correspondence will come back to us. So, any questions from the public? Any member here wish to speak on this application? Seeing none, any questions from council? Council Williams.
So I just have a question about the fact that there's no 0 meters into the variance that they're asking for between the 2 side yards. Is this a typical variance that is being asked for, like particular duplexes, or is this out of character? I'm just wondering if there's this is normal.
So because the severance line would be along the center of the dwelling, we won't have that interior setback from each dwelling. So it would have to be 0 meters, because essentially the property or the home would be right on the lot line.
I guess I was asking if that's typical of a duplex, right?
General zoning bylaw did not account for what was crafted in the year of 1983, division of semi-detached dwellings into 2 separate properties and type. So that's why there's also a 25-meter frontage requirement. We're seeking a variance. Our zoning bylaw is out of step with the reality of built form if you want to have each unit in separate ownership. And so the variances are meant to provide a clear legal title based on the proposed lot as configured in the severance application. So when we go through the process of rewriting our zoning bylaw, this element would be eliminated, so you wouldn't have these nuisance minor variance applications.
Councilor Tilly.
Just a question, and so this is originally semi in 1983, it's the date I believe you just gave, that was something that was made into 2 different residences at that point?
No, this building goes back to the turn of the century. The zoning bylaw was created in 1983, and the zone classification that was assigned to the property recognized in the Z5 classification of semi-detached entity, but the zone standards that were applied to the property did not reflect the reality of a division along the common lot line, or common wall.
So I was going down a different thought line. My apologies for not stating that. Is there any, the fact that it's being lived in as 2 separate units, is that correct, that there's 2 separate buildings? Is there any grandfathering of building rules based on the fact that this is something that's been in existence for some years?
Through you to Councillor Tilly. So there are provisions in the Ontario Building Code that speak to buildings that are older than 5 years. So that is why we've requested that the owners of the property seek a professional to do that design calculation and work to try and figure out what does that look like in this specific situation if they're going to be using and relying on what's called Part 11 of the building code for buildings that are in existence older than 5 years. And if there is any compliance alternatives that can be drawn on for something like this. There's not always compliance alternatives for specific things when it comes to life safety. The code is pretty strict on that. So again, it comes down to how their designer wants to take a look at this in its current built form and how it relates to the Ontario Building Code. And then we'll review it to ensure that, you know, we're in agreement and that it complies with the provisions.
No further questions, councilors? Can I have a motion, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Rowland, that PD report number 16-2023 be received, and that all comments and correspondence received through the consultation process be returned to staff for consideration in a future report to the committee on the disposition of this matter.
All those in favor? That's carried, thank you. So on now with the motion to adjourn this committee of adjustment and go back into council, please.
By myself and by Councilor Chili, that pursuant to the Planning Act, public meeting of the Committee of Adjustment be adjourned at 7:28 PM. And the council meeting be called back to order.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Next up is 8.1, report number PD 17/2023, application for a zoning bylaw amendment, Edworthy West Pit proposal, file number ZC 0123. Notice has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. The Secretary Treasurer will record everyone who has commented on this application, attended and or have registered with the First Division to attend the meeting this evening. Those individuals will be notified of the decision or the convening of future meetings. And again, I'd like to repeat that if you're here for this application, make sure you sign the sign-in sheet, please. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce, before I introduce the owner today, I want to say there'll be no decision tonight. We're here to listen to you and hear your comments. And we still also, regulations have changed so that under the Planning Act, before you have to have all the comments in by all the experts before you have a public meeting. The reverse has happened now. So we have a public meeting, we ask your comments, and it gives a chance for the professionals or the applicant to deal with those questions and comments that you have. And then the public meeting to make the decision will be further down. Actually, won't be a public meeting, but it'll be further down. See you over here, please. It's fun. You have to reach the top. Way over there, which I can't reach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're here tonight to review and consider proposed zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate what we refer to as the Edworthy West aggregate pit proposal by Cambridge Aggregates Incorporated. Subject lands are located in parts lots 16, 17, 18, concession 9, the township of Dumfries. Purpose of tonight's public meeting is to provide an overview of the development application itself, solicit comments from interested members of the public, government agencies, and other stakeholders, so that all of the items through the consultation process on the merits of the zoning change application can be considered a future report to Township Council. And it allows for an early identification by Township staff of issues or matters to be assessed by staff that would be form part of a future report to Township Council on the proposed zone change application. As a part of what I'm going to speak to in the next few minutes, we're touching on the background and location of the property, the planning policies both provincially and locally that are applicable to the nature of the proposal, an overview of the zoning bylaw amendment application itself, and any initial analysis or recommendations for the consideration of Township Council. Subject lands are actually comprised of 3 separately held properties that have been leased by Cambridge Aggregates Incorporated. Starting from west, moving east, or moving from Shoaldice through to Spragues, we have 1262 Greenfield Road. In the center is a parcel that's only identified with a roll number. There's no civic address assigned to that property at this point in time. And then at the extreme east along Framing Spragues Road in a triangular shape is 1354 Spragues Road. Excuse me. The 3 properties as identified are situated within parts of lots 16, 17, and 18, concession 9 in the township of North Dumfries. The operation site, which is a portion of 1262 and 1354 Greenfield and Spragues Road, only a portion of those subject lands are actually captured as part of the zone change application itself. The zone change application and the operations area is shown in the red outside line as shown on the screen adjacent to the text. The operations site is approximately 44 hectares or 110 acres in area. The area where actually extraction of aggregate would occur is proposed to be about 35 hectares or approximately 87 acres in area. Those portions of the property at 1262 Greenfield Road and 1354 Spragues Road that are outside the limits of the outline area in red, those portions of those 2 parcels will remain zone agricultural Z1. That's the present classification applied to the properties in their entirety, and only those portions outside the proposed operations area would remain zone Z1. The balance of the properties within the red shaded boundary is what's to be set aside for the purposes of operation and extraction of aggregate materials. And it's within that red zone, red line on the 3 parcels that would be zoned Z14 mineral aggregate. At present, both the properties located at 1262 Greenfield Road and 1354 Spragues Road are developed with single detached dwellings, and there are accessory buildings on those 2 parcels. The balance of the properties outside the immediate residential envelope are under active agriculture. Both of the 2 dwellings are located outside of the operation site and will remain on the properties as presently configured. The parcel in the center, which is the parcel that has no civic address, it's currently a vacant farm parcel, and the majority of that property is under active agricultural cultivation. When we look at some of the land uses that frame the edge of the property and or in proximity to the subject lands, we see to the north predominantly agricultural land uses consisting of field crops and hedgerows. There are several rural residences located northwest of the site and are accessed via Shoaldice Side Road. The Enbridge gas pipeline, which traverses in an east-west direction, actually frames the north boundary of the proposed aggregate site. To the east, we have rural residential properties, including that's on the boundaries of within the property ownership that's subject to the rezoning application. We also have a forest and an unevaluated wetland feature. There are several rural residential properties located along Spragues Road corridor itself, as well as other agricultural uses. To the east of the subject lands across Spragues Road is an existing aggregate operation. To the south of the subject site includes some rural residences, both along the Greenfield corridor and on Shoaldice Side Road south of Greenfield. The Township of North Dumfries Public Works Yard is located along Greenfield Road, immediately abutting the subject site. And then we also have continuation of agricultural uses located south of Greenfield Road and Sprague's Road. Excuse me, further to the south, we also have the Dumfries Clinian Carolinian environmental sensitive landscape feature. To the west, the predominant land uses are rural residential and agriculture. And those uses are separated from the subject site by Shouldice Side Road. Shouldice Side Road, which frames the west boundary. Greenfield Road frames the south boundary. And Sprague's Road frames the eastern boundary of the subject lands. Sprague's Road is a regional road. Greenfield Road and Shouldice Road are under the jurisdiction of the Township of North Dumfries. Just to give a bit of context on the proposed aggregate operation itself. The property, that is the operation site, as I mentioned previously, is about 44 hectares in area, or roughly 110 acres. The area where extraction is to actually occur, so inset within the operation site, would be approximately 35 hectares or 87 acres in area. And it's the operation site, so the 44 hectares, which is proposed to be zoned Z14 mineral aggregates. The Edworthy West pit proposal is been filed with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry as a Class A licensed operation, with extraction occurring above the groundwater table. The proposed maximum extrication of aggregates has been identified with an annual tonnage not to exceed 1 million tons. The proposed Edworthy West pit is designed to serve as an extension to the existing Cambridge aggregate main pit, which is located in the northwest corner of Alps Sprague's Road. And it's identified with a civic address of 1182 Alps Road. The Edworthy West pit is proposed to operate as what they refer to as a load and haul pit, which means there'll be no processing of materials at site on the Edworthy West pit. The extraction of aggregate materials will occur loaded onto tri-axle highway trucks, which will then be shipped to the Cambridge aggregate main pit that's located on the north side of Alps Road. Material will then be processed, stockpiled, blended, and shipped from the existing main pit area via the existing haul route accessing Cedar Creek Road and to the marketplace. The owner has indicated the extraction of the aggregate lifespan of the Edworthy pit is projected to be 10 to 12 years of duration. Rehabilitation and closeout of the facility is proposed to occur over another 2 to 3 year period. Upon closeout and rehabilitation of the licensed area, it is proposed that the majority of the site would be returned to agricultural use, with some areas set aside for environmental enhancements. The drawing on the right-hand side of the screen is meant to show the proposed load and haul operation. So in red is the proposed boundaries of the Edworthy West pit. And then you'll see there's a driveway, a new driveway proposed to enter onto Sprague's Road at the southern portion of the site and travel northerly up Sprague's Road to the main pit ownership, which straddles Alps Road on the north and south side. So a new driveway would be created off of Sprague's Road to enter south of Alps Road on the main pit, traverse through the main pit, cross over Alps Road, and then continue into the main pit north of Alps Road to the processing yard. And then eventually, when the product is going to the marketplace, it would continue up the existing haul route through to Cedar Creek and exit the site through their existing driveway onto Cedar Creek Road out to the marketplace. As mentioned previously, this load and haul scenario would be using series of triaxle dump trucks to move the product extracted from the Edworthy West Pit to the main pit located north of Alps Road. All processing, stockpiles, blending, and shipping of materials would occur from the main pit. As I mentioned previously, there would be the need for 2 new entrances required on the Spraggs Road. And the region of Waterloo would have to grant the access permits as well as approve the design standards for the 2 new driveways, both Edworthy West as well as on Spraggs Road for that main pit portion located south of Alps Road. There is no proposed access from the Edworthy West Pit to either Shoaldice Side Road or Greenfield Road. Now, starting with looking at some planning policies and regulations. So I'm going to start at the provincial level, and then work our way down regional and then township. The staff report outlines a whole series of applicable sections for each of these pieces of provincial legislation. For the purposes of brevity, I've just hit some of the key elements to focus attention on things like land use compatibility, as set out in section 1261 of the provincial policy statement. I wish to clarify for everyone, this is the 2020 provincial policy statement, which is presently in effect, not the draft provincial planning statement that's out for public review as we speak. So it says all major facilities, and it says such as resource extraction activities and sensitive land uses shall be planned and developed to avoid, or if avoidance is not possible, minimize and mitigate any potential adverse effects related to odor, noise, dust, contaminants, and to minimize risk to public health and safety. As it relates to natural heritage, requires that natural heritage in areas to be protected for the long term. Development and site alteration may be permitted in natural heritage features where it has been demonstrated that there are no negative impacts on natural features or their ecological functions. In a moment, I'll be speaking as to why this policy provision is important, given the adjacencies to the site of both an environmental core feature as well as the Dumfries Carolinian environmental sensitive landscape, which are very dominant in this quadrant of the township. Additionally, development and site alterations shall not be permitted on adjacent lands to natural heritage features and areas unless the ecological function of the adjacent lands has been evaluated and has been demonstrated that there be no negative impacts on the natural features or on their ecological functions. Turning our attention to our primary cultural areas. These lands are presently designated in the township and regional official plan as prime agriculture. When we look at non-agricultural uses within an agricultural setting, states that municipalities may only permit non-agricultural uses in prime agricultural areas. There are a series of exemptions. The one most applicable to this zone change application would be limited to extraction of minerals, petroleum resources, and mineral aggregate resources. Continuing on with the premise of the non-agricultural uses within prime agricultural areas, PPS indicates that any new or expanding non-agricultural use on surrounding agricultural operations, the lands are to be mitigated to the extent feasible. And that then leads into rehabilitation. First policy under section 253 speaks that progressive and final rehabilitation shall be required to accommodate subsequent land uses. And in this case, the owner has signaled that the future intent, once the extraction of aggregates has been completed, and the site is rehabilitated and the license is surrendered, would be returning largely to an agricultural land use activity. The intent of rehabilitation is to recognize that extraction of aggregates is meant to be an interim land use and to ensure that rehabilitation supports the future and long-term use of the property, in this case for agricultural activity. Specifically in section 254 of the PPS states that in prime agricultural areas and on prime agricultural land, extraction of aggregate resources is permitted as an interim use, provided that the site will be rehabilitated back to an agricultural condition. Turning our attention to the Places to Grow Act and specifically the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe area. And obviously, Waterloo Region forms part of the Greater Golden Horseshoe area. Once again, we're talking about the existing policy as it exists from year 2020. And like the provincial planning policy statement, the growth plan is currently under public review and that is being rolled into a new provincial planning statement. So focusing on section 428 of the Golden Horseshoe Area Plan states that any application for new mineral aggregate operation will be required to demonstrate connectivity between key natural heritage features and key hydrologic features. Obviously, there's an intent that they either be maintained before, during, and after the extraction of aggregate resources. How the operator could replace key natural heritage features or key hydraulic features that will be lost from the site with the equivalent features on another part of the site or on adjacent lands. How water resources will be protected or enhanced, and how key natural heritage features and key hydraulic features impacted in their associated vegetative protective zones will be addressed. Section 428 mineral aggregate subsection 3 states that in prime agricultural areas, applications for new mineral aggregate operations will be supported by an agricultural impact assessment, and where possible, will seek to maintain or improve connectivity of the broader agricultural system, not only within the adjacent property, but within the adjacencies. Continuing on with the Places to Grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe area, we continue. Section 428 states that for rehabilitation, the new mineral operations following will apply. The disturbed area of the site will be rehabilitated to a state of equal or greater ecological value. For the entire site, long-term ecological integrity will be maintained or enhanced. If there are key natural heritage features or key hydraulic features on the site, or if such features existed at the time of the application, the objective is to maintain the health, diversity, and size of these key natural heritage features, either be maintained or enhanced. And once the permitted aggregate extraction is finalized, and we're looking now at rehabilitation and close out of the site, that the area will be rehabilitated as early as possible in the life of the operation. If we have aquatic areas remaining after extraction, they are to be rehabilitated to support aquatic enhancement. And it will be done as part of that broader eco district and combined with both terrestrial and aquatic rehabilitation. We are to look at, when we look at lands outside the natural heritage system for the growth plan, final rehabilitation will reflect the long-term land use of this area, taking into account the applicable policies of this plan, being the growth plan, as well as it's in local official plans, as well as provincial policies. And it continues by stating in prime agricultural areas, the site will be rehabilitated in accordance with the PPS, which I've already referenced. Where we have extraction and we are within a key natural heritage system set out in the growth plan, we're looking at restoration of lands. There is a formula that would be applicable to the natural heritage system for the growth plan. And obviously we're looking at it not only within the context of the property, but the broader eco district found in that area. Finally, we're looking at All applicable policies in the PPS that are not captured under the growth plan are to be carried forward for applicable applications within this district to align with the PPS as it relates to broader rehabilitation practices. As we look to the regional official plan, subject lands are designated as protected countryside and primary cultural area. There's an overlay designation of mineral aggregate resource area. So we recognize that the stratigraphy of our subsurface demonstrates high mineral aggregate potential, which is not uncommon through the central portion of North Dumfries from the Grand River westerly. But the principal designation is protected countryside and primary agricultural area. In addition, the subject lands are located adjacent to a core environmental feature. So if you recall, there is a portion of the property to the east of the Township Public Works Yard that was taken out of the proposed mineral extraction zone limits. That portion of the property is actually a core environmental feature. There is a woodland area located at that spot. And we are within the entirety of the property and extending south easterly within the Dumfries Carolinian environmental sensitive landscape. A section of the subject lands on the northeastern edge of the site is located within the 25-year time travel of the Willard well field, which is located right at the southern Cambridge boundary. And the Willard well field is about 2.8 kilometers northeast of the subject site. The regional official plan continues that both in the protected countryside and primary agricultural areas, consistent with the provincial policy statement, our planning documents locally have to be consistent with the policy directives of the PPS. It does allow for mineral aggregate operations as an interim use within prime agricultural areas. As it relates to environmental sensitive landscape, if you remember, this is the Dumfries Carolinian environmental sensitive landscape. States that were development or site alterations proposed on lands within or contiguous to a sensitive landscape. The owner applicant will be required to submit an environmental impacts statement and address the landscape in addition to any other policies that are applicable within section 7G of the regional official plan. Continues, states that where an environmental impact statement is required in accordance with policy 7B12. The region is to have to demonstrate to the region that the proposed development or site alteration would have no environmental impact on the environmental feature, the ecological functions of the sensitive landscape, and the region may, subject to conditions, approve or recommend approval of the application. Core environmental features. So this would be the woodland area that immediately abuts the subject site. States that development or site alteration will only be permitted on lands contiguous to a core environmental feature, where once again, environmental impact statement or similar study has been prepared and been deemed to be satisfactory by the region, and that the proposed development or site alteration would not result in an adverse environmental impact on the feature and the ecological functions of the core environmental feature. Once again, the region may require conditions of approval to implement such recommendations. Continues in subsection 7C11, states that environmental impact statement will be necessary to identify appropriate buffers to that core environmental feature, once again to the satisfaction of the region, and such buffers will serve to protect that core environmental feature from adverse environmental impacts and provide opportunity for net habitat enhancement or to enhance where feasible, restore ecological functions of that core environmental feature. The location, width, composition, use of the buffers will be in accordance with approved environmental impact statement. The Township of North Dumfries official plan. A lot of the policies I've just spoken to are repeated in the township's official plan. For the purposes of brevity, I'm just going to hit a couple of key points. The subject lands are designated protected countryside and primary agricultural area in the township's official plan. Once again, these lands and in this immediate district, we've also identified it as a mineral resource area. We have also identified that core environmental feature, be that adjacent woodland feature, and of course, the broader influence of the Dumfries Carolinian environmental sensitive landscape that crosses through the property and to the southeast of the subject lands. Primary agricultural areas do permit aggregate operations as an interim use. Transportation and traffic. We do have policies that speak to the efficient movement of people and goods throughout the township. And this includes policy to provide a safe and efficient movement of trucks through and within the township and to minimize the impact of heavy trucks on residential areas. These studies will be required to support and to identify any potential impacts of the proposed development on regional and township roads, and to make sure that those impacts are appropriately mitigated. And in section 52510 of the township official plan, it does talk about the construction of intra-pit road systems and new roads intended for aggregate traffic in order to lessen the impact of aggregate traffic on local residents and adjacent sensitive land uses. As it relates specifically to mineral aggregate resources and resource areas, it is an acknowledgement and consistent with the provincial policy statement that aggregates form part of an economic and growth opportunity, not only for the township, but Ontario proper. These policies mandate the orderly extraction and optimum utilization of mineral aggregate uses while preventing or minimizing potential impacts of these aggregate operations on surface water, groundwater resources, surrounding communities, cultural heritage resources, environmental features and ecological functions, and agricultural resources and operations. And finally, within aggregate resource areas to be implemented through a zoning bylaw amendment, council can define those permitted uses, which could include things like crushing, screening, washing, stockpiling, blending of recycled asphalt or concrete material, equipment storage, weigh scales, parking, or office facilities. Now, as the proponent has indicated, this is a load and haul application. And as such, we could look at scoping the actual permitted uses then to the extraction of aggregate products exclusively with a load and haul offsite. There would also need to be, if we're looking at ancillary land uses, we're looking at portable asphalt plants, concrete plants, and similar. They would actually have to be identified in the permissive range of uses in the zoning, implementing zoning bylaw amendment. And if we're to do that, we have to look at adjacent uses, to look at negative effects associated with reduced water supply, and potential impacts associated with noise, dust, odor, lighting, and outdoor storage. And obviously from adjacent environment, we're looking at negative effects of dust, chemical spill, runoff, or contamination of surface or groundwater. And then finally, access being obtained directly to a road capable of handling the anticipated truck traffic. Regardless, if we're a defined source water protection area, none of those ancillary uses are permitted within a source protection area. Finally, the township's official plan speaks to in primary agricultural areas, rehabilitation to agriculture will be a first priority. We're looking at progressive rehabilitation. And essentially, we're looking at substantially the same land area will be rehabilitated back to an agricultural condition to allow for the same range and productivity of crops common in the area. So the township's document marginally expands on the provincial policy statement, which just says back to an agricultural condition. The township's official plan gives context as to what an agricultural condition is. And it speaks to allow for the same range and productivity of crops common in that area. The environmental sensitive landscape and the core environmental feature, essentially we mimic and mirror the policies that set out in the regional official plan that I spoke to a moment ago. Turning our attention now to this proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The applicant proposes to change the property from Z1 agricultural to zone Z14 mineral aggregate extraction to recognize the proposed license boundary on the 3 properties. And I'll show a schedule in a moment that gives that context. The permitted uses within the Z14 zone include the making, establishment, or operation of a pit or quarry, farming. Remember, this activity will occur in phases. So those phases that have either not yet undergone extraction or have been done as part of progressive rehabilitation, farming is a permitted use within the Z14 classification, with the exception that sod farming and commercial greenhouses, as well as no residents, are permitted within the Z14 classification. Accessory buildings or structures that are directly related to the extraction operation and shown on ministry approved license or site plan within the license. Barns, sheds, and other buildings associated with farming operation are also permitted within the Z14 classification. Now, as I mentioned previously, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment would only apply to the operation site. So the balance of the land at 1262 Greenfield Road and 1354 Sprague's Road that are situated outside the operational boundaries would remain within the Z1 zone classification. So this map, this hatched area shows the proposed boundaries of the 3 properties that are subject to the zone application and to migrate from Z1 to Z14. The aerial photo on the right-hand side of the screen, the red outlined area across the 3 properties corresponds with the proposed zone schedule showing the Z14 limits. And as you can see, balance of those ownerships for 1262 Greenfield Road and 1354 Sprague's Road would remain zoned Z1. There has been public correspondence. Some was included in the staff report that was available at the end of last week. Others have been received Friday and into today. All correspondence received up to the time of the public meeting, it's been made available to the township clerk, has been previously circulated to township council, as well as will form part of the public record. I'm going to very quickly at a high level summarize some of the key elements of each of the pieces of correspondence that have been received. Sherry Roberts, Councillor Ward 5 from the city of Cambridge, is concerned about the proximity of pits to the city township municipal boundary. He has expressed the concern that if expansions are permitted, these pits will become very close to homes in the West Galt area, where residents are already experiencing excessive dust, vibration, and noise problems due to the proximity of those existing pits. To David Piper, wishes to register his opposition to this application and to any further applications that may be put forward as it relates to gravel extraction elsewhere in the township. Piper stressed that preservation of heritage is important to us all, but history and heritage are only about the things we have had, have made, or have cherished. He defines that heritage includes the land we stand on, from which we derive our sustenance, and the land we cherish in our everyday life. It's not just about flora and fauna, although those are key to our heritage as well. It's about our agriculture, vistas, and the peace and tranquility of our township. And he's asking councilors as your first duty to act as stewards of the land, and stewardship is about what is lacking in the approval of this application. He expresses the opinion that there's plenty of pits operating in North Dumfries, but these benefits to us are short and fleeting, and we're left with the problems that will be ours for years to come. And Wolf, the regional councillor, the region of Waterloo, representing the city of Cambridge on regional council. She's also the former Cambridge city councillor for Ward 5 or the West Galt area. She expresses her concerns about the expansion of aggregate pits close to Cambridge residents. And residents are already suffering from dust, noise, and vibration from the existing pits. Expresses a concern for health and quality of life. And the express statement about the cumulative effect of breathing dust particles and constant noise. And she urges to deny the amendment to license the Edward V. West Pit. The Ontario Farmland Trust requests the council not approve zoning bylaw amendment application ZC 0123 as it relates to the Edward V. West Pit proposal. Expresses the concern about the continued loss of agricultural land and the ability to provide food to support area population. The ability or lack of ability to effectively rehabilitate land from former aggregate operations to support continued agricultural activity. The loss of agricultural land and the conversion to aggregate sites diminishes the ability to sequester carbon, provide habitat for wildlife, filter and store water, which can actually improve water quality in surrounding aquatic systems. And by removing huge quantities of rock and gravel, results in permanent changes to hydrology of soils, and thus the conditions which support particular crops, plant, and animal life. Carol Wathers opposes the proposed Edward V. West Pit and has listed, I've summarized 5 key matters. Health hazards associated with aggregate mining from dust particulates that cannot become that become airborne from the site. And no matter how one claims to mitigate the problem, it simply can't be done. And there's no adequate information on the cumulative effects of the dust and the airborne particulate from the site. Another problematic issue is Sprague's Road, in roughly 1.5 kilometers from the city boundary. As a truck corridor move is stones by heavy truck to the processing area on the north side of Ellis. 40 trucks an hour, or roughly 1.5 trucks a minute, will be throwing rocks, making dust and congesting the roadway where people will make their way to and from Cambridge. Third issue, noise pollution will be a byproduct of these operations, despite what is being said about the effectiveness of firms. Today, she hears machinery from the pits that are presently in operation north of the Ellis Road, and she knows it will only increase with the added noise from the constant parade of heavy trucks. We'll be migrating between the Edward V. West Pit to the main pit north of Ellis Road. She's estimated that based on land area to be extracted on the Edward V. West Pit and through rehabilitation, that only 66% of that land would be rehabilitated back to agriculture. And she says even if this were to happen, statistics indicate that it won't, and this represents substantial loss of farmland. And then she raises concern, what is to become of North Dumfries? It's a beautiful countryside township. As this continues, there'll be very little farmland for future generations. The rapid pace of destruction of the land is a terrible travesty. There was one other piece of public correspondence received at the end of the day from Kim Denowden. And Ms. Denowden, I'm going to summarize her notes. This application is incomplete and requests another public meeting should be convened, as many of the agency comments are not in. This is a pit and load and haul operation. The proposed route on Sprague's Road as a minefield is currently in poor condition, considered the top of the list in the region for accidents and fatalities. In this section, there are accidents on a weekly basis, cannot handle the proposed truck traffic up to 40 trucks per hour, then hauling into the main pit, crossing over Alps Road is ludicrous. The applicant's prediction of 10 to 12 years lifespan does not look at the fact that the farm across the north entrance, which is also owned by the Edwardy family, and there's likely a chance that they'll be up for production and looking for the same entrance and route proposed. This adds another layer on top of what's being considered tonight. Closing, and ask that another public meeting be convened once all the information is in, reviewed, commented on, and then given the public a chance to review and make their complete submissions to the township before any decisions are made. Agency comments. We received comments from the region of Waterloo. There was a stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment, and it was submitted to the provincial ministry that oversees archaeological resources. And regional staff confirmed receipt of the documents, but also the acknowledgement letters from the ministry indicating that all regional requirements related to archaeological resources have been completed, and they have no further concerns in that regard. As it relates to the traffic impact study, the region has reviewed the study prepared by Paradigm, and they concur with the conclusions and recommendations as noted in the submitted traffic impact study. Continuing on with the region's reviews, hydrogeologic study, environmental impact statement, the agricultural impact statement, the noise feasibility study, and the air quality assessment or / dust mitigation. Each of those 5 technical studies are presently out, and there are consultants that have been retained that are completing independent peer reviews on the contents, methodology of each of those reports, and evaluating the recommendations and conclusions arising from each of those 5 reports, and the comments arising from that peer review on each of those 5 studies will be reflected in the future formal comments to be provided by the region to the township on each of those 5 studies. So in recognition that those 5 technical studies, the peer review is only underway as we speak. No answers have come back as a result of that peer review, and as such, region cannot support the applications at this time until those studies have been reviewed and accepted. And as it relates to the parallel process for the filing of the license application with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the region of staff have noted that the ARA application cannot be supported until the required zoning bylaw amendment has been approved. And the region has identified that further comments as it relates to the ARA application will be noted in a further report at a later date. Grand River Conservation Authority has indicated no objections to the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment. It is the GRCA's opinion within the matters within their scoped areas of responsibility. The conclusions and recommendations of both the natural environment technical report and the water report are acceptable to the GRCA, subject to all the conclusions and recommendations of those 2 reports being fully implemented. The GRCA has also reviewed the various reports and submitted plans, and they've identified that the zoning bylaw amendment does not capture areas where they would have concerns over steep valley slopes, so it's not an issue. And the GRC is further satisfied that there's no wetland area located on the western edge of the field at 1354 Springs Road. Remember, we identified an unclassified wetland area. The GRCA is of the opinion now subsequent that there is no wetland area in that adjacent western edge of 1354 Springs Road. Township Public Works, Engineering and Public Works Department has reviewed the traffic impact study. The township, unlike the region, does not support the recommendations and conclusions in the traffic report. We believe that further review and gaps of information need to be addressed. The traffic impact statement looks at a 5-year forecast. We know that the aggregate operation will exceed generally for a 10 to 15-year time period between extraction and rehabilitation, and the township be looking for 5, 10, and 15 years forecasts and modeling along Sprague's Road, because we know that there's increased traffic occurring along Sprague's Road as urban air continues to grow. So Cambridge continues to grow, and then there's of course background traffic coming up from Brant and the city of Brantford along the Sprague's Road corridor. The proposed haul route. The southern access to Sprague's Road is not shown in the same location as the site plan submitted with the aggregate resorts application. So there's need to ensure accuracy and linking between the two documents. The traffic impact study does not address the spacing between the 2 points of access. And the township is specifically concerned a loaded triaxle or triaxle with pup trailer coming onto Sprague's Road will come to a stop before it enters into the Sprague's Road corridor, and where there's a gap in traffic, will then enter into Sprague's Road and proceed north. It will be at a slow rate of speed as it builds up momentum as it travels north. But because it's not traveling that far north, it'll never get up to full road speed before it has to slow down to make a left-hand turn to enter the main pit just south of the Alps Road. And this becomes even more problematic because we're looking at a truck entering the corridor roughly every 2.5 to 3 minutes if optimum production levels were to be realized. The traffic impact study also modeled the current traveled speed of traffic. The posted speed on this portion of Sprague's Road is 80 kilometers an hour. The speed component has demonstrated that the 85th percentile is close to 100 kilometers an hour. Study actually identified at 97 kilometers an hour. So this concern of truck traffic entering onto Sprague's Road and or slowing down to make the left-hand turn into the main pit at the traveled speed of the vehicles and no planned improvements to the Sprague's Road corridor is of concern to township staff. There's no contemplation of acceleration or deacceleration lane. And if we look at the north entrance, there's no dedicated left, or I use the word slip-by lane that would allow through traffic. If the truck is staged to make a left-hand turn, waiting for southbound traffic to clear, there's nothing to stop vehicles from, there is no slip-by lane to allow that northbound traffic that wants to continue on to Cambridge to slip around that staged truck. And we acknowledge the obvious. There'll be no truck traffic permitted on Greenfield Road or Shoal Side Road from the Edwardy West. So in summary and in closing, Madam Mayor, the key items that will be reviewed by staff and included in the next report to Township Council will include any comments or correspondence received through the consultation process. That consultation process doesn't stop this evening. Anytime up to the date when council makes the decision is the consultation period. So any correspondence that we receive leading into tonight, coming out of tonight's meeting, or in the weeks follow up to the time of decision, all of those comments and correspondence would be reflected in that future report to Township Council. We're obviously going to be focusing on land use compatibility with adjacent and surrounding sensitive land uses, and that is both rural residences as well as the predominance of the environmental features. We'll be looking obviously at elements associated with dust, noise, vibration, hours of operation, haul routes, limits of extraction, and similar activities that may shape either specific zone standards to be incorporated into the zoning bylaw amendment, which may be either prescribed setbacks and or scoped permitted uses. And or it could be recommended conditions that may be requested of the Ministry of Natural Resources to be included in an operating license that would be issued under the Agricultural Resources Act. So anything to do with performance falls largely under the ARA process administered by the ministry. We'll obviously be looking at the impacts to surrounding agricultural operations and return of land to an appropriate rehabilitated state once the aggregate operation ceases, and to support generally a comparable level of agricultural activity to what occurs or exists today. And once again, we may be looking at recommended conditions to the Ministry of Natural Resources to be included in an operating license issued under the ARA process. We'll be looking at the phasing plan and the continued progressive rehabilitation practices. And once again, there may be specific conditions requested of the ministry to be included in an operating license issued under the ARA process. We're interested in the cumulative impacts of this proposed aggregate operation in the context of existing or planned aggregate operations in proximity to the site in terms of environmental, we're looking at obviously habitat, connectivity or linkages, woodlands and other ecological systems, groundwater resources, and adjacent sensitive land uses, which includes the adjacent rural residences. Once again, looking at cumulative impacts that may inform specific zone standards to be incorporated into an implementing zoning bylaw amendment in terms of prescribed setbacks and or permitted uses, or recommended conditions to be requested of the province to be included in an operating license issued under the ARA. We're obviously very concerned on the potential impact of Sprague's Road as it relates to the proposed haul route, as well as the proposed township road crossing of Alps Road associated with the driveway access points from the haul route. And once again, this review may recommend conditions to be requested of the province as it relates to the operating license under the ARA, or as it relates to Sprague's Road corridor, the region of Waterloo. And then finally, all the policies that I've touched on at the beginning related to the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the region official plan, and the township official plan, all of those policies have all been properly accounted for and addressed. And where appropriate, the appropriate mitigation measures have been deployed. It is the recommendation of staff to council this evening. No decision to be rendered on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment at this time. And all comments and correspondence received through the consultation process associated with the proposed amendment be returned to staff for further consideration in the future report to council on the disposition of this matter. And so, Madam Mayor, identified several times tonight, there is a sign-in sheet at the desk adjacent to the entry door to the room. The people fill that information out. They would be notified at a future date when a report on this matter is returned to council.
Thank you, CEO. we're gonna start with the applicant and then the public meeting. I just want to say tonight that when you're speaking, if we don't ask any questions or comments, that's because it's our turn to listen to you. And that's what council will be doing tonight, listening to you. So I'd like to call on Caitlin Port and Neil Roger from MHBC planning. Please support.
There we go. Okay, we have a presentation loaded. Now, do you control or do I control? You're going to control. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Foxton, members of Township Council, Township staff, and members of the community. My name is Caitlin Port. I'm a registered professional planner with MHBC Planning. I'm joined this evening by Chris Isley of Cambridge Aggregates and also Neil DeRuyter of MHBC Planning as well. We're here to provide information on the proposed Edworthy West pit zoning bylaw amendment application. So I only have 10 minutes tonight, so I'm going to move pretty quickly through some of the first slides that I have as part of this presentation. And we want to make sure that I have enough time to focus on some of the comments and concerns that we heard from the community during the public information session. The existing licensed pit is identified on the slide in yellow. There were a number of comments in the meeting agenda package that reference an expansion that would be occurring closer to Cambridge. That is not the case. The main pit is not proposed to be expanded closer to Cambridge, so there's a little bit of confusion with that. The expansion that we're proposing is the Edworthy West pit, which is identified on the map in that orange color, and it's located about 1.5 kilometers to the southwest. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip over this slide. Mr. McNeely provided quite a comprehensive overview, so I don't want to be too repetitive. So I know that this is the question everybody's asking every time that there's a new license application and new zoning bylaw amendment before Township Council. Why another pit in North Dumfries? And I'm going to attempt to answer this in about 1 minute. So as we know, there is an ongoing high demand for aggregate resources in Southern Ontario to support the ongoing growth in infrastructure projects in this area. North Dumfries is blessed or cursed, whatever you want to, whatever you think is the right answer there, with a major outwash deposit that the glaciers left behind. And this outwash deposit is an important provincial source of high quality construction and road building aggregates. And finally, North Dumfries, and including the Edworthy West pit, is located in a strategic, close to market location with good access to major transportation networks as well as major growth areas. The proposed Edworthy West pit is a replacement pit. So although it is a new license application, this license will be replacing the depleted reserves of the existing main pit. Next slide, please. So I'm going to skip over this one too. We did have our public information session last Wednesday. I did provide quite a comprehensive overview on the proposed pit operation during that information session. We do have a link in that information session if you weren't interested, if you weren't able to attend, and we can certainly provide that link and you can watch the video. Mr. McNeely touched on this, but I'm just going to provide a little bit more information and context. Rehabilitation is proposed both progressively and then the final rehabilitation back to a predominantly agricultural land use condition. And we're also proposing some ecological enhancements as well. Given that we're turning it to an agricultural land use condition, there is included on the site plans, the aggregate resource site plans, a comprehensive agricultural rehabilitation monitoring And this is to ensure that the pre-extraction soils will be maintained. So post-extraction, we'll see the same soil quality. And that's why we have that agricultural rehabilitation monitoring program included on the site plan. So the site plans will ensure that the area is rehabilitated to an average of class 2 CLI class 2 soils, which is what is existing on there today. So in terms of the proposed ecological enhancements, there is a core environmental feature located just to the south. That's that green area there. And what we're proposing is to do some infill plantings. So that's that sort of bright green color there to that existing core environmental feature. We're also proposing 2 new ecological linkage areas as part of progressive and final rehabilitation. And those areas are identified in that shaded blue color. And then in addition, we're also proposing some shrub and tree plantings in strategic locations in the setback areas. And that's identified in yellow and pink. And this ecological enhancement plan will result in a net gain in environmental and ecological integrity over what's currently on site. So as I mentioned, we had our Aggregate Resources Act public information session last Wednesday. And we heard a number of concerns from the community. And I'm sure that we're going to hear these concerns again tonight. So these concerns included trucking and traffic on Sprague's Road. There were some questions regarding the Elks Road truck crossing, concerns related to cumulative impacts and potential health impacts from dust, as well as, pardon me, the loss of agricultural land and agricultural rehabilitation. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to touch on some of these. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as Mr. McNeely mentioned, there is a township official plan policy, policy 5.2.2.10, and this policy states that the township will encourage the construction of intra-pit road systems and new roads intended for aggregate traffic so as to lessen the impact of aggregate traffic on local residents and sensitive land uses. The Edworthy West Pit Haul Road has been designed to maximize the use of an intra-pit haul road to minimize trucks on public roads. About 2.4 kilometers of intra-pit haul route will be used, and this is the lowest impact haul route option. Trucks will travel back and forth between Edworthy West and the main pit along Sprague's Road, which is a stretch of road about 1.5 kilometers in length. Using the intra-pit haul road option that we have proposed, no trucks will enter Cambridge. Sprague's Road is a regional road designed and intended for trucks and heavy goods movement. Processing and shipping will occur from the main pit and will utilize the existing main pit processing infrastructure, as well as the existing main pit entrance onto Cedar Creek Road and Hall Road to the 401. 2 new entrances are proposed onto Sprague's Road that will be built to Region of Waterloo truck entrance specifications. These entrances will be the responsibility of Cambridge Aggregates. They will be paved, and they will be kept clear of mud, debris, and any gravel. When trucks leave the proposed Edworthy site, they will be covered and their loads will be properly secured in accordance with the Highway Traffic Act. The Region of Waterloo has provided a clearance on the use of Sprague's Road as a haul road, and they've also provided an in-principle approval of the 2 new entrance locations. We received the comments from the township on the traffic impact study on Friday, so we're currently reviewing those comments, and we'll work with both the township and the region on the functional design of those 2 new entrances through the entrance permit process. So in terms of the proposed Elks Road truck crossing, which is part of this inter-pit haul route, I did want to provide a little bit of history and a little bit of background, seeing as this was raised during the public consultation session we had last week. So in 2010, if we go back to 2010, there was a license application and a corresponding zoning bylaw amendment for an expansion to the main pit. That was submitted to the township and MNRF in 2010. And at that time, there was a conveyor proposed under Elks Road. In 2012, that zoning bylaw amendment was adopted by the township to permit the expansion, and the license was issued by the MNRF in 2013.
You're more than enough.
Thank you. In 2013, there was a license amalgamation and site plan amendment submitted to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Township. And at that time, there was an amendment to increase tonnage and also to add a octa per truck crossing. Subsequent meetings were held with township and region staff, and that truck crossing was approved as a major site plan amendment and was added to the site plan. Next slide, please. So the existing main pit site plan does include permission for an at-grade crossing. We're currently working with township staff to complete the required technical submission and enter into a satisfactory road crossing agreement. We're working on that process now and anticipate that it will be for council in the near future. Mr. McNeely touched on this as well. We are aware that cumulative impacts are a concern, and this was assessed as part of the application. It is currently being peer reviewed. There is a dust management practices plan prepared that will also be implemented as part of this application. Next slide, please. Last slide. Last slide. The rehabilitation plan maximizes agricultural rehabilitation and was developed in consultation with the property owners who currently farm this property and will farm this property once construction is completed. As I mentioned, there's a rehabilitation monitoring program included on the site plans. And I encourage you to visit the main pit and take a look at the rehabilitation that's been undertaken there. About 17 hectares of the main pit has already been returned to an agricultural condition. Thank you.
Now we'll open it to the public, and there's a list of people here. So once again, remember, we're here to listen to you. The other thing is, if somebody said things, please don't repeat it like 20 people in a row. Let's get fresh new information if we can. And the first one I have out is Octavia Mello. Is Octavia here? Are you going to take over the presentation because Gary had to leave? You have 5 minutes. Everybody has 5 minutes, okay? And the clerk will tell me when your time is up.
We had a slide presentation. I won't follow it exactly, but it would be a good guide.
I'll try. Mhm.
Anyway, Gary and I put a presentation together. We're concerned about a number of the issues that have been raised already. But in our presentation, we focused on air quality, dust and air quality, and crystalline silica in particular.
I got it.
We haven't got.
Yeah, I did. It's this one, right? Yeah.
I think that's the.
Yeah. I have about 10 of them.
Now I have to write one up.
Yeah.
Starts with focus and presentation or presentation. It's the one to the right, or to the left, yeah, but that, no, that was the one below, isn't it? That one there, I think.
Can't drag it over there.
Can someone else share?
Last
Are you
one.
able to share?
Yeah.
It's just not coming up here, showing up here, but. Barely, you have to stop this one. Oh, go back to that.
Yeah.
No, it's fine, just share it.
This one?
Yeah, share this one.
This one?
Or is it one?
This one, right?
That might be the same one, the one on the top.
They're both the same.
It's gonna share your.
Why is this one coming?
Close it, just
Now
close
it's
it.
on my screen, but it's not coming out of yours.
There you go.
So if I give you my.
It's.
Did I
You've got,
close
give me
them?
more text.
Okay, the next slide, please.
So the first one, there is presentation to the right, there you go. And the next slide.
Okay, there's the next one. Okay, so as I said, we'll focus on cumulative impacts of dust emissions. Next. A question that needs to be stressed or talked about a little more is what is the project? There was a comment that there's no, the pit isn't moving, extraction isn't moving any closer to Cambridge. By the way, we live, my backyard backs onto the North Dumfries. So, yeah, the extraction is at the proposed new pit, but the processing will be next to my backyard, just about. So, we're concerned about that. It's more than just a new pit. So the project includes the processing, which was close to my backyard. The next slide, please.
Yes, I am thinking on it.
Okay, we summarize in this slide that there's more detail that I can get into what the provincial and municipal requirements are. The bottom line is that the province doesn't really pay much attention to dust emissions and air quality. The only concern they have is that the new pit include the best management practices. And we're relying on the municipality, both at the region and here, to really look carefully at the air quality aspects of this, the cumulative impacts, because let's say at the provincial level, there seems to be no great concern. And so you need to receive from the proponent a cumulative impacts assessment report on air, on dust emissions that is acceptable to the region and to the township, that demonstrates that the proposed pit is acceptable. Not only in terms of air quality criteria that the province may have for all kinds of other purposes, but also from a human health impacts point of view. The next slide, please. What is dust? Dust is made up of a mixture of different particle sizes, different chemical compositions, and we're particularly concerned about crystalline silica, which is a carcinogen and is in the smaller size fraction, which stays airborne for considerable time and distances and can cause, as I say, cancer, and accumulates from various sources in the area. So crystalline silica is a particular concern, and you need to consider not only whether the estimated concentrations meet the criteria the province may or may not have, but also the health impacts of the exposure to that dust. The next one. So here we will, you will have a copy of this, but we list some of the health impacts of silica dust. We're told that don't worry about it. The concentrations are the dust drops a few tens of meters away from where it's emitted. Don't worry about it, but we're not convinced, and you need to be concerned. So the next one. And we'll go over this. The next one. So we've got a couple of slides here indicating that in spite of the on-site control and management of dust, you have situations like this, road dust, and this another example. So reality needs to, very right. So the smallest particle, sometimes known as PM2.5, PM10, is the airborne considerable times. And so you need to be careful in the assessments to ensure that you capture all the nearby sources that are contributing to emissions of dust. And that where the people are impacted, they see the estimates are based on the cumulative impact of all these sources. And you've got 20, 25 pits, operating pits in west of Cambridge that are contributing to the load that we're observing right now. We've had I have a little bit of background in air quality and modeling and so on. And so we've had a quick look at the report, and we see a number of gaps and omissions. These are summarized here. I'm running out of time, so maybe we'll move on. So we've got a couple of slides here with some recommendations to the Northeast Council. In the short term, we urge you to look at who's doing the peer reviews of these projects, the report, the technical reports that were submitted. Are the reviewers independent of the aggregate industry? In the case of dust and impacts on human health, do the review teams include this air pollution, dispersion calculations, cumulative impacts, and health impacts? And then in the longer term, we're lucky in this area to have we're rich in aggregates, and it's a source of income, and it's an important resource, and so on. But there are ways of getting at the aggregate in a more sustainable way. And so we're suggesting here a number of things that you consider for the longer term as to how you can move from what is essentially a proponent-driven process where another pit shows up from anywhere, and you have to deal with providing some guidance as to, maybe buffer the zone. What kind of buffers you expect from major urban areas, and don't, or perhaps put some constraints on the developers as well. Maybe you allow a certain fraction of your prime agricultural land to be extracted at any one time, and
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I talked to the minister about these things yesterday, and the mayors of the township today
yeah.
about exactly what you said.
Well, it's common sense. You need to develop an important resource in a sustainable manner. So anyway, and the final advice to you is sometimes you have to say no. Doesn't have to be yes or no. Thank you.
Sorry. Next is Karen Scott Booth with Mary Ann Young and Dr. Paul Westcott.
Good evening, Mayor Buxton, members of council, staff, and concerned citizens. We are Marianne Young, Karen Scott Booth, and I'm Paul Westcott, all residents of North Dumfries for many years. We're speaking to you this evening on behalf of your North Dumfries Conservation Alliance. Slides.
Yeah.
The lands that we have been talking about this evening are located within and contiguous to an identified environmentally sensitive landscape. This area is identified as a core environmental feature and provides connectivity. It's identified as protected countryside and prime agricultural lands, class 1. Identified to have significant natural heritage and cultural heritage resources. And this proposal proposes a risk to public health for residents and wildlife, endangered and protected species. It's known to impact their air quality. There will be impacts to our groundwater source, and there will be impacts to community safety.
Thanks, Paul. If you can take that to the next slide. I'll keep going for sure. All right, sounds good. So what Paul described has been described in the evening quite a few times. So these are all the stones that everyone else has. And if you can move it one further slide, thank you. And what we're saying is, from those concerns, there are really 3 reasons to say no to the zone amendment change. And the first one being, what we talked about a lot, is our environment, that sensitive ecosystem. So I just want to add just a few words to that. So basically, that environmental area that's inside that pit provides connectivity to lands that lie between the Dryden Tract, the Southern Tract, the Alps Wood, and the Southern Forest, all situated in the Gulf Paris Moraine. And once you start hauling aggregate around that sensitive area, you just remove that connectivity for any wildlife. And so creating pits or quarries requires the removal of virtually all natural vegetation, topsoil, and subsoil to reach the aggregate underneath. So not only does this lead to a loss of existing animal wildlife, it also leads to a huge loss of biodiversity and as the plants are destroyed. So again, we're part of the northern end of the Carolinian forest, and bird species have been known to breed in these locations, species that are only specific to that particular Carolinian forest. And there are many of which are very rare in Southern Ontario. And this is a destination for hikers, environmentalists, and birders, with more than 130 species of birds observed in this area. So bringing those pits closer and closer to that Carolinian forest will destroy all of that. The second reason is, again, we talked about this too, it's the loss of the prime agricultural lands. So the only point that I want to say here is that we also want to bring to the attention of the council that this specific application acknowledges that approximately 1/3 of the prime agricultural lands will not be rehabilitated for future agriculture. This is a significant and permanent loss of our prime agricultural lands. And therefore, this proposed extraction cannot be considered to be an interim use. With the climate change crisis and the real concern for food security, our local food sustainability should be a #1 priority for this council.
And finally, we'll talk about public safety. So traffic, we've talked about these 2 entrances on Sprague's between Greenfield and Alps. The proponent states there will be no cleaning of stones, mud, or debris near the entrances, which is a serious concern for someone who lives on Sprague's roads and travels it often. The proposal also identifies an additional 40 gravel trucks per hour. That this fails to identify the number of trucks already entering and exiting from the existing pit across the road, and also the current volume of traffic, which has been identified as increasing constantly, and I know this because I live there. Sprague's Road has seen a significant increase in traffic volume and excessive speeds, and resulting in numerous serious accidents, including a number of recent fatalities. There was no mention of that in the traffic study. Vibration is a concern. Okay. We are also worried about our wells. And I noticed people are saying there are several residences. Well, let me tell you, there are 20 residences directly impacted by this proposal, and another 30 within less than a kilometer. So those are 50 private rural residences with wells that are all dependent on this area, which is identified as a water recharge area. And when we asked at the meeting with the developer or the proponent, what happens if it impacts our water? They tell us there's an emergency plan for that. And we say that's not good enough. Thank you.
I think we have Karen Scott next.
Okay. My notes. I don't have a visual. So Mayor Foxton, members of council, staff, and fellow citizens, thank you for the opportunity to speak as an individual citizen this evening. My name is Karen Scott Booth, and I, together with my husband and family, live on Sprague's Road. More than 2 decades ago, we purchased a small farm across from the environmentally significant and sensitive area known as the Southern Tract. Since that time, we have spent many, many years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in restoring our property, both our historic buildings and our agricultural lands. As respectful stewards of our property and the surrounding natural landscape, we are proud to see the results of that dedication. Dedication that was not for profit or greed, but with the intent of honoring the past and with the hope of securing this property's future. Once at risk of demolition, our property is now identified as significant and protected. It is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act for its architectural and historical significance, and recognized for that significance by the region of Waterloo and the township of North Dumfries. And now this property stands proudly to form a part of the rural landscape, the views and vistas that contribute to the significance of the regionally recognized scenic road of Sprague's. Yes, Sprague's Road has been awarded the highest level as extremely significant. And scenic roads and special character streets are transportation corridors recognized by the region for their quality and quantity of natural heritage, cultural heritage, recreational features that contribute to their scenic value and special character. The conservation of scenic roads improves our quality of life through the protection of biodiversity and native habitats, the enhancement of cultural resources, the increase of recreational opportunities, and the provision of economic benefits for the community through tourism. This has never been so evident until we shut the province down for COVID. Our Southern Tract was overwhelmed by the number of people just trying to get back to nature, to breathe the fresh air, to walk among the trees, all providing much needed comfort during that crisis. The walking trails of Sprague's and Alps roads were full of parking, areas were overflowing, and hundreds of cars parked along both sides of those roads. Sadly, there are so many reasons for concern with this Edwardly Pit application, not the least of which is traffic. It is common knowledge that Sprague's Road, our beautiful scenic road, is quite dangerous. The increase in volume of traffic over the past few years, coupled with the excessive speed of more and more drivers, throws the question of the findings of the traffic study into question. Experience tells us that these two areas proposed to serve as entrances and exits on Sprague's are located in some of the more dangerous areas of the road. In fact, I just received stats from the region this afternoon that confirm that 60% of the serious accidents with injury and death are in the area of Greenfield to Alps. 60% of the serious acts on Sprague's are in the haul route or the proposed haul route. The proposal of 40 trucks per hour between these two exit entrances, especially as these trucks will both be slowing and accelerating in an area of through traffic with numerous hills and curves. This is a cause for concern and should be considered a no. The Sprague's Road is also a road that is a scenic road and cannot be altered, should not be altered. Any proposed mitigation by altering the design of or lanes on this road is unacceptable. The road has been identified and has to be conserved. To allow this proposal to proceed, the applicant must demonstrate, and I underline the word demonstrate, that there are no irreversible or negative impacts that cannot be mitigated. The language of these reports includes phrasing like, for the most part, or it is anticipated. There are no definitive statements, no assurances that respond to the requirement of a demonstration that there will be no negative or irreversible impacts to this community. The very word to mitigate acknowledges that there will be or must be a correction to something that is wrong, or something that has been damaged, or something improved that is a bad situation. This application will create numerous bad situations. Is that my time?
Good, thank you.
Okay.
I don't have a presentation either, nor did I write anything down. I thought I would just speak about what I heard tonight. So basically, I too live close to where this new pit will be, and we bought our property about 25 years ago. It's just a small amount of acreage. So unfortunately, we won't be able to retire rich and sell our property to a gravel pit. But we too have spent a lot of money on our property to naturalize it because it was the edge of a farmer's field. It's now a beautiful park. It has a natural butterfly sanctuary on it. But as soon as you start putting coal pits and all of that noise and dust close to where we are, we feel that all of that will be destroyed. So where is our protection for this? There is, for example, in North Dumfries Township, you have 6 million tons of aggregate that leave every year. If you compare that to Wilmot, it's only 1 million tons, and they're complaining. To us, our small township and the amount of aggregate that's leaving here every year, and it's just going to continue. That's not sustainable. It doesn't take anybody with a lot of math skill to figure that out. And everywhere you drive, you see pits. Some of the older pits had even better, like you see some of the older ones look better than the newer ones do because they have trees. You can't really see into the pit. But the new pits that are coming up, there are no trees. You've got a berm, but you can still see over it. It just looks like devastation. And to me, thinking that my backyard is now going to look like this, it doesn't have to. And that's what I'm really concerned with is when you have that much tonnage leaving every year, that's a lot of profit leaving the township, but it's not in our hands. Some of that profit should be going or shared with the township so that you have the resources to, number one, manage your bylaws. So in other words, you have the ability to control your dust, your noise, and even your traffic bylaws, because on our roads, especially on Shoaldice, there are a lot of heavy trucks. No one's policing that, but yet there's a bylaw there that says they can't be there. If you have the resources, you could police that. If you have the resources, you could also repatriate some of the other older pits that haven't been remediated. So we're seeing the newer ones are being remediated sooner, and that's great to see. But there are a lot of unremediated pits in North Dumfries. North Dumfries would be a far more beautiful township if that were in place as well. So those are my comments. I just hope that the people that are here have spent a lot of time and energy to come here to formulate their thoughts. And to us, it's like, we don't want to be here just so that you can check the box. We really want to be heard, we want to be part of this, and we do want to see some good actions coming out of this. I know that all of you feel you have more power, but I think we do have some choices. So, thank you.
This would be Jeanette. Friends, thank you, Jeanette.
Good evening. I'm not used to using a mic. I'm got a loud voice, so if it gets too loud, sorry. My name is Jeanette Berenz, and I have lived on Taylor Court just off of Greenfield Road for 26 years. I know there has and will be much documentation about major concerns about gravel pits to people, places, water, air, and other living things, and I have chosen a different path. I would like to share with you what it's like with life with a pit. When we chose to build on Taylor Court, there were 7 other homes that were built many years before our arrival. We are the second house in from the road. Life was lovely, peaceful, with large properties and friendly neighbors. Then we were informed that the Shirk property at the corner of Greenfield and Dumfries Road had been purchased by a gravel pit. The same owner owns another operational pit on the other side of Dumfries Road. So one company with 2 operational pits. You would think this company would be required to close down one before opening the other, but no. Life is better with 2. A neighbor across the street from me was part of a gravel pit committee at the time. This neighbor would say, the manager of the pit promises to be a good neighbor. I will now say, be aware of wolves in sheep's clothing. Well, I retired. I began to hear loud noises from the pit during the daytime. I was given the name, cell number, and email of the Shirk pit manager from my neighbor. Initially, when I would call, the pit manager would come over, stand on our backyard deck. After the second time, I raised the issue with the manager that coming to our home would not solve the noise issue, that the noise was coming from the pit, and that is where he needed to take action. He often would say he is only crushing for a few more days, but it would start up again in a few more weeks. So I began to send emails to him, the Ministry of Natural Resources, and even a contact at the company owning the gravel pit. It was a challenge to get contact with this company with no reception, but I chose to say there was an emergency. That got someone's attention. I also asked for the sound studies that are to be completed at different times. Well, these displayed the crusher was not in the designated area, which would place the crusher in a much lower space. As well, I also called the company doing the sound noise studies. They reassured me that I was not hearing any noise and that it was not possible. We tried to get these tests completed in our backyard on the deck, but no, they chose to continue to use the safe locations, such as behind a natural berm, which is in front of a created berm. These studies are requested by the pit company. Would it not be more effective for the test to be completed independently of the pit? A self-fulfilling prophecy, I would say. In addition, I also experienced tremors while sitting on the deck, a new experience. I was informed this was not due to any activity from the pit. I said I was documenting this with an email in case we have any future problems with our foundation. And oh, did I mention the trucks? Well, Greenfield Road and other connecting roads are no truck roads. These signs with a picture of a truck with a line through it are posted at both ends of no truck roads. Numerous residents have contacted the police only to find out the courts have given a lower fine, making travel on such streets not a worry. We need your help here before something tragic happens. So what have we learned from my experiences? I've timed myself. As elected officials, use your voice. If I let things be, I would be experiencing much noise and tremors. It's up to you to take care of our township people, our wonderful township, our water, the living creatures we share this space with, and our air. Much more needs to be done. Take more action before it's too late. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bonnie Faw. My husband Bob and I are residents of Taylor Court off the Greenfield Road, like Jeanette, where we have lived for the past 42 years. I attended the webinar on May the 24th last week, where the plans for the Edworthy West pit were outlined by MHBC Planning, with the main spokesperson being Caitlin Ford. Others ready to respond to our questions were Brian Sully, Derek Flake, and Sue Cummings. There may have been more, but those are the ones I recall. Sadly, there were only 8 participants according to my Zoom screen, which was unfortunate, as all of North Dumfries Township, Cambridge folks living against the dance pit, and others living across Spriggs Road from this main processing pit at Elks Road in Spriggs, should have had the opportunity to hear the presentation. And it was very similar to tonight's. Webinars are not for everyone, certainly very few from the results of those present for that hour and a half. And so tonight has been another reveal. But does the Cambridge Council know what is planned for this pit? As this doesn't just affect North Dumfries Township. David Coxon reported in Cambridge Today on February the 28th, 2022, in a quote from our mayor, Sue Foxton, that, and I quote, aggregate producers hold 3,600 licenses and 2,500 permits for extraction sites throughout the province of Ontario. In 2020, local operators extracted 5.7 million tons of aggregate from our North Dumfries pits. She said the industry, and I'm still quoting, keeps saying that they need more aggregate every year, but they used less, so this appears to be greed. And that is the end of the quote. I hope this is an accurate one to David Coxon, Mayor Fox. David Coxon, Mayor Foxton. I imagine those numbers are much higher now in 2023. The Edworthy West pit, if approved, would be a load and haul site only, and trucks which could be single, double, or truck with full trailer would be used to carry the aggregate from the new pit to the main pit off Elks Road. I have heard the numbers 35 to 40 entrants and exits per hour. With the stone pit right across Spriggs Road, I'm unsure if that would double this number or would that be calculated in the 35 to 40 trucks per hour, which is still a lot. There are 2 entrance exits planned, as been noted over and over, and Bob and I strongly disagree with the study presented at the webinar that the one closest to the Greenfield Road would not present dangerous issues. In our 42 years here, driving on to Spriggs Road off Greenfield is an adventure at the best of times. One can pull out with no vehicle in sight coming around the bend, and then suddenly a car will be right on one's bumper. Truck traffic would pull out even slower than a car, so this does indeed constitute danger, even just a little bit down the road. The gravel would travel. The gravel would travel along Spriggs Road to another roadway to be created off of south of Elks Road, across the presently pristine field behind the home at the corner of Elks and Spriggs. Take a look at that property. It is gorgeous. Trucks would travel along this new roadway, stop, I hope, at the Alps Road and then cross it into the existing pit where the gravel would be processed. I have family living on Fraserwood Drive and on Bewley Place. Have these folks been notified about the plans for the new crossing on Alps Road, or the grinding, banging, vibrating noise increasing with more gravel processing in this plan? Pardon me? Okay, I think I can make it. The answer to that is no, and that's not fair. More noise, more dust in the air, which is to be monitored by sight only from early morning until night. I wish I had the recording of the noise from the main pit made by my son from his deck last summer to share tonight, but I do not. However, it is not a dawn till dusk noise anybody would want while relaxing on their deck. The trucks hauling the gravel are not owned by the pit company either, and many of those are already breaking the rules of the roadways in North Dumfries Township in terms of speed, usage, and existing rules. I'm sure police reports can back this up. At the present time, no gravel trucks are allowed on Alps Road, so this new crossing would have to be approved, making another change. I know the aggregate in our area is top quality, but we already have 44 gravel pits in North Dumfries Township. We can't leave our home and travel in any direction without navigating several pits along the way and the troubles they present. Road repairs are paid for by whom? What remuneration does the township receive for gravel extracted? I don't know. Every day we're losing prime farmlands across Ontario and here as well. Someday we're going to wake up to smaller and smaller places to grow food and protect our lands. 11 million tons of gravel are supposed to come out of the Edworthy pit over the next 10 to 12 years if this zone change is approved. Please don't think us so naive that that amount can be remotely restored in the reclamation phase. It won't have the mature trees, brush, birds, animals that live there now. It'll have roadways down into the pit floor for agricultural usage many meters down, ugly deep holes. Just look at the swaths of dirt visible outside this building to the east, where mature trees once lived on the hillside. There will be more and more burns. I'll finish off by saying that please don't approve this zone change. Our area has enough pits already in a small locale. The leasing of the properties and the plans for this pit have been extensive by the company, but they have brought in people who live here pretty late in the game, which is not fair. And most people on the west side of Cambridge have no idea about these plans for this new pit and the processing that will go on at their doorsteps, and that's not right. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Fox, City Council. As a resident of Cambridge for the last kilometer, the Cambridge aggregates pits and 2 kilometers from the proposed new site, I strongly urge you to oppose the application for the Edward West pit. I was here last year speaking out on the dance pit expansion. Here we are again facing a similar situation and asking for assistance. It was a couple of weeks ago when I learned of this pit. With no communication being sent out to our community in Cambridge, I wonder if in the future there can be a way to improve on this. Maybe North Dumfries can collaborate with Cambridge and a general mailing can be sent out. I attended a North Dumfries Ward 3 meeting, and I heard residents talking about how much they love their homes and that they would not live anywhere else. Yet all around them, their beautiful countryside and farms are being swallowed up. They recounted firsthand knowledge of the dangers of heavy truck traffic coming from the gravel pits. I had not anticipated tonight for my letter to be read by Mr. McKinney, and thank you very much for that, because I'm a very nervous reader. So I won't repeat a whole bunch of stuff, but I did bring a few slides along with me. So there's one before this. Yeah. This image illustrates how close the subdivision is to Cambridge Aggregates operation. That is the playground looking towards the corner of Alps and Sprague. I've made a little red arrow where behind the house in the corner is one field they will be opening to accommodate truck traffic. It is alarmingly close, not even a kilometer away from this playground at John Corbett Field in Cambridge. I'll also mention that there's a nursing home beside this park. Image number 2. This image is from a Cambridge Facebook group. The question put to the group was from someone who was looking to move to the city. This one answered, quote, "Stay away from the Southwood area of West Cambridge. I moved here when it was still country 40 years ago. The area has been ruined by gravel pits, very noisy, and the dust is unhealthy. Do not be taken in by the nice homes. You will not be told about it," end quote. MPAC has admitted that there is an impact on the value of homes here. Yet in the reports, the corporation denied this in order to mislead the Ontario Land Tribunal. Not a good writer or a good speaker. I prefer to express myself through my artwork. I'm a visual artist and I have created 18 illustrative paintings to address my feelings on this issue. And I've decided to share 2 of them with you tonight. Okay. So this is one of 18, just keep in mind, and so context you lost. So I call this one tragic. And obviously it illustrates the loss of our farms. There is a mandate from the government to have gravel extraction near where it will be used. This mandate does not protect our local food sources, especially here in North Dumfries where there are so many pits and no end in sight. Unfortunately, our provincial government no longer sees food as more important than concrete. You see the last one. On your doorstep, this is my nightmare. This is what I hear from in my neighborhood and yours. Gravel pits surrounding us, trucks zooming along the road that are currently scenic and a pleasure to drive. Gravel pits should be further away from subdivisions. So I'm a little out of, I have to scribble out a bunch of stuff because all my comments are already read, but that's great. I would suggest this council consider limiting the size of the trucks used. I didn't mention that in anything, but if they're saying that they could use these big walking trailer things, still the smaller ones, that's even worse. A ray of hope came in the news that an ICBL is being looked at by this council. Please make this a reality and do whatever you can to stop this application and also the expansion of the dance pit.
Thank you, very good job.
Dear councilors, thank you for your time. I shouldn't take too long. I think a lot has been said very well. Thanks to Karen for showing up at our door the other day, or I wouldn't have known about this. So I just got a few things to say. Our situation is a little bit unique. We are on the corner of Alton, right? So I'm Mark Everett, my wife Kiki, and we've got 2 boys, 11 and 14. We bought our property from Cambridge Aggregates, and we bought it with full disclosure. We knew what we were doing, and we balanced it off. And there was 2 things that really helped us make the decision, and it was the fact that, you know, I think we used 10 to 15 years as a time frame. We used 10 to 20, and that 20-year span for us will be right around retirement age, and we expected the pits to be depleted. It's a finite resource, and then the remediation would be at least in process, but not done. And for us, that was the number one thing that said to us that it was a responsible decision to make. And the second thing was truck traffic will leave the highway 97, period. So those 2 things were what we based our decision on. And we've been good neighbors with Cambridge Aggregates. We've not complained once. This is the first time we've spoken about him, to be honest with you. However, it is our backyard that transit truck highway is to be placed. And if the Cambridge Aggregates, if you have that up on your computer, slide number 19 that they showed the other night, either somebody's scale ruler is broken or I'm missing something, because the entrance way to the existing pit is definitely not where it's shown on the plans. So we're talking a few meters away from our property line versus, if you look at the drawing there on slide 19, probably a couple hundred meters, and that's a huge difference. So with 90 spacing between trucks transiting back and forth across our backyard, I'm not sure what to say, like, I'm still not even, able to absorb it, quite honestly. So the approvals were done for the existing pit, and then sort of things changed. Hey, I haven't quite finished using the ones that have been given me, but now I'm asking for more. My mom would tell me to clean my room before I did anything else. So I suggested the room be clean, things be done, buttoned up, tidied up, before we give them permission and approval to continue on. A lot of other people have stated concerns for safety and air and all the rest of that stuff. I have all those same concerns, and I won't rehash those. But the other thing, as counselors and as council, PPS 2020, it was section 2362. I don't have that quote, but if you could maybe pull that up on your screen, I think that would be great if we could just revisit that as a council. I think it's an important one. And slide 19 on there, so if you have that at all. There's a discrepancy at least between the Elk Road and this way. It won't happen. It can't happen where the existing open is made.
Well, that's what it says.
Oh, yeah, they're not according to design for sure, so. I've got some scale rulers at home if anybody needs some. Provide them.
I remember when you
Yeah. We're happy there, we love it.
Easter.
Oh, thank you. So I can't remember what slide it was, but in PPS 2020 and the section 2362.
Are you done? Do you want to keep talking while we look that up?
I'm good. I just think it would be nice to read that out loud to council. Just to ensure that we've got all those words down. I think mitigation
It's
is
2020.
mitigation is the key word that we're looking at there. But I thank you for your time.
Which one did you say, Mark? It's PPS 2020.
Yeah, it's section 2362.
361 says there's 626.
Yeah, so in the top one, I can't see that from here. But... Oh,
Want me to read it again?
Section 2362, non-agricultural uses in prime agricultural areas states that impacts from any new or expanding non-agricultural uses on surrounding agricultural operations and lands are being mitigated to the extent feasible. That's your job, to mitigate. To the extent it's feasible. Thank you.
Yes.
Please bring up the slide presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Reeser. I'm here tonight representing the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture. I live just south of New Dundee, and I'm a farmer, and I primarily grow turkey and also grow some crops. I have been to a long list, a number of these kinds of consultations, and I always say the same things. And I'm going to say them again, and I'm going to say them as quickly as I can in point form. Farmland is a non-renewable natural resource. When it's paved over or mined, it's gone forever. 2, aggregate extraction is not an interim use, never was, never will be. It is a permanent land use change. It's forever. Number 3, there are hardly any, I would say none, no sites that have ever been rehabilitated back to their original agricultural capability. None, and I've seen hundreds. And 4, exhausted sites will be a permanent blight on your landscape forever. And I don't think I exaggerate. I'm not that kind of person. It's the truth. You have a map in front of you, which comes from the Regional Fish Plan. It is a resource aggregate map. It shows North Dumfries Township, and the brown area represents aggregate resource. So tonight's meeting is about the decision to license or begin the process of rezoning for a single pit. But in fact, it's about everything you see on that map. If not today, then sometime in the future, all that land in brown will be mine. Ladies and gentlemen, and I'm speaking to you elected, you are unfairly burdened with the responsibility to both represent the interests of your constituents, which are here and live in your township, and to also abide by the provincial legislation that applies to aggregate extraction. You also have to deal with very wealthy proponents who have resources that you cannot pretend to match, who have the money to hire the very best consultants who will justify anything that the proponents want. The deck is stacked against you and us. Which leads me to ask the question, why do we even entertain this process if the result is preordained? If no municipality ever says no, not ever, nothing will ever change. Nothing will change. You have dealt with this issue in the past. You are dealing with it today. And you will be dealing with it again and again until everything is gone. And I can't stress the importance of that. This is a beautiful place where we live. And to see it pillaged makes me sick. So I have one request from the Federation of Agriculture and Farmers in this township and in this municipality. Seriously consider making a statement. And I'll leave you with this. There is only one landscape. And we, the people, and the natural environment, and agriculture all have to share it. Thank you very much.
And boy, it's in Dutch. Mayor Sue Boston and counselors and staff and everyone here. I'm not gonna go through and repeat a lot of what's been shared. I live on Greenfield Road. I've been a resident there for 52 years. And I'm going to echo a lot of what's been shared about my concern about safety. I do a lot of walking. And we moved to the country to enjoy the peace and beauty of our township. And so now when I go down the road, I walk down our road towards Shoal Ice Road. And I used to be able to listen to the sounds of the birds. And now as I turn the corner onto Shoal Ice Road and head down towards Alps, before I even turn the corner, at 10 to 7 o'clock in the morning, I can hear the sounds of the crushers as I walk down the road, and the sounds of the birds and all of that. And I walk to the corner and I come back. And on my walk, I oftentimes will see 2 or 3 gravel trucks that are whipping down Shoal Ice Road. And I am told my GPS took me this way. And then I will come back and I'll turn back down towards where we live. And there's gravel trucks going up and down Greenfield Road. And as been mentioned, there are signs, and we're not supposed to have these trucks going down these roads. And I looked at the other day, I was walking down Shoal Ice Road and I was looking at the conditions of the roads. They're cracked, they can't handle the trucks, they're not supposed to be going down the roads. And it just breaks my heart. And I lost a son 19 years ago on Sprague's Road, but not the distance between Greenfield Road and Elms Road. But back then, Sprague's Road wasn't what it was today. Today, it's a very congested, it's a very busy road with trucks and cars, and now we want to add on a whole bunch of gravel trucks in the mix of all of that. And there's gonna be accidents from happen, I know, because I now, when I go down Greenfield Road, I turn right onto Shoal Ice Road and go over to Spreads Road and turn left, because it's not safe for me, as been mentioned by so many. The cars whip around from northbound and whip around, and it's not safe. And then there's proposed entrances down further on Sprague's Road, where you're gonna have these trucks coming in and out, and it's not safe. And I've gone through the loss, and I don't want to see other accidents happening, and it's been mentioned, there's been many accidents between those two sections. So it breaks my heart to see farm fields that have been turned into gravel pits. Our beautiful, beautiful township has been mentioned many, many times, is now turning into gravel pits. Thank you.
That's all I have on my list tonight. Would anybody else like to? Kim, just want to make a comment? Oh, okay, I was just told she doesn't. I apologize. So can you wait till Kim down, please? Sure. Thank you. She's online. Kim, you're on mute. Can you hear me, Kim? Okay, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Hello? Can you hear me?
No, still can't hear you, Kim.
Okay, sorry. Gonna go out and try again. Not sort of. No.
Kim, another gentleman wants to speak. Do you want to go out and come back in and see if you can get it to work then?
I will try that.
Okay, thanks, Kim. So you wanted to speak? Do you want to come forward, please?
Yes, hello, Mayor and Council and admin. My name is Andrew Rouse, and Rouse Family owns the property on Ellis Road. We're back in the concession. We're downwind of 4 pits. Okay, we've hired a consultant. We have an elderly mother who's living there. She's a sensitive receptor. So is everyone that visits our property. The fine particulate travels all the way to Cambridge. So your council, pardon me, must get in cahoots with the Cambridge Council, otherwise known as GALT, where our grandfather was the last mayor, and get it together. Okay, so we have a long history of watching this unfold. Nobody's fooling anybody anymore. Okay. We put a lot of financial resources. Again, we have consultants from the industry over 25 years. We have documented leaky equipment 1.5 meters above the water table, and they're leaking petroleum fluid. You got it? We got it on tape. We have them crossing roads without stopping at stop signs. We will get you all that if you need be. So what we have to do here is we have to represent what is called the social trust. Okay, that's sure you can represent the members of the township, but actually it's the trust, it's the land trust. We're all entrusted with this land. We have to make room for folks from Heidelberg, maybe. Or maybe we tell them to go back to Heidelberg or wherever else and find gravel there, because we're living with the effects of it. So it's pretty basic. So I'm asking council to actually say a definitive no, absolutely not. Okay, and we have to all start to work together. I know you have to be, humming and hawing which way, but the evidence is endless. We have too much information now to let it go. So please contact council in Galt, Cambridge, and talk with them, because that's part of your job, right? As elected officials, speak with them and say, okay, we got to start talking facts here. The tiny particulate that is the most deadly travels the furthest. The heavy particulate that is bigger drops out sooner, okay? But it's still over a mile, the heavy particulates, but the very fine particulate, the silica, goes all the way through to Hespeler and past. But it's falling out all around us. I'm sure you've all seen it on your cars, correct? On your cars and your windows. Also the noise, we know that, you know, I spend time at our property and all of a sudden my leg's shaking like this. And that's the sound of the crusher. Because it's what we have things recorded where the glass in our cupboards. This is traveling quite a distance. The wildlife corridors are completely broken. Farmers' fields act in part as wildlife corridors. Yes, they're covered in crop. Yeah, but they allow animals to travel. These things destroy it, and there is no reclamation. There is no reclamation. When they say the land is put back the way for farming, it's not. The gravel's gone, the soil's muck. And no matter what they do, they can't change that. And this gentleman nailed it when he was explaining that. There is no reclamation. So don't let them tell you there's reclamation. And they have, what is it, 75% of the properties they haven't even tried on most of them. And what they did is not farmland. It's over. So we have to draw a line now. We have to tell them, go back to Heidelberg, go back to France, Lafarge, whichever they are, and tell them we live here. We need to protect the social trust. Okay?
Thank you.
Easy.
Kim, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, we still can't hear you.
Oh,
Is your volume up on your computer? You're muted again. There we
Yep.
go. Still can't, you're muted again. By what I can see, you're muted.
I
Well, you're
know,
unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
I know. I have had problems with my internet tonight too, so.
Can you call in, Kim?
Yeah, I can email. I just want to say,
Cynthia, can you send her a number, please, to call? Cynthia's gonna try and call you, send you a phone number, okay, Kim?
okay.
It should be in her Zoom invite. I would just resend her Zoom invite, so it should be in that.
The phone number is on the Zoom. If you go back to your Zoom, Kim, you'll see the phone number and on how to connect.
Yep. Okay. Bye.
I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for your comments tonight. This council definitely understands what's going through and what we're going through. I'm sure this council would say, no amount of money. We turn all the money down, everything down, if we could just have our land back. We really do. We love this township. And but we have to follow the letter of the law. But see how we open some doors tonight. Thank you. But yes, thank you for your, where would we be without comments from the people? Where would we be without your voice? You have to have your voice. I was reading an article the other day, just while Kim's going on, and it talked about all the things that have changed in history and got revolutionized. And it wasn't from government, it was from the people. The people changed the world. As the government started in representatives of the law, sometimes the law may be wrong, but the people's voice changes the world. How's Kim doing that? You have anything else? Did anybody else like to speak? Yes, sir, go ahead. Come up to the microphone, please.
Sure. I'm also one of the residents. So thank you very much for hearing us out and for everything you've had to say. And I want to thank everybody here for all they've had to say. And, I know this is just words right now and everybody's speaking and these have happened many times before. But, we need to see action. It looks like this area is a sacrifice. You're sacrificing a part of the province for aggregates. And we don't understand how that, you're sacrificing a part of the area, but there's more that you're sacrificing. You're sacrificing people's quality of life, like my brother. So I was thinking about it, but there, my mother sits on our farm and she, it was her dream to move our family to the country, raise her 6 children. And, we had an absolutely stunning place. There were vanishing points in the distance. There was no berms hiding big, huge gravel pits. And, we have a complicated relationship with the pits and now we're completely surrounded by them. And so we feel the impacts severely. But I think that what we're really interested in hearing and knowing is, are we going to ask you questions here? What's happening with the ICDL?
That report, see, did you see, James, when is that report coming? While he's looking that up, I did meet with the Premier. I did meet with the Minister of Natural Resources and Forests this week. I'm working on with 3 other mayors, the mayor of Burlington, the mayor of 4 other mayors. Mayor of Burlington, the mayor of Caledon, and the mayor of Lincoln, which is by Niagara, to get a minimum distance standards. We have minimum distance standards for a lot of things, but we need them for aggregate pits for settlement areas. And the minister didn't turn me down. That's going to be the first time that I've asked for something that haven't turned me down anyway. So I've got CEO McNeely working on what's a minimum distance standard? What's a good distance from a settlement area? Yeah, no, between a pit and a settlement area. So land that they can't touch.
Oh, land that they can't touch.
Yeah, that's right. So a minimum distance standards where the pit cannot go into. So I'm.
So like next to the forests you're talking or next to?
To the settlement area. So, so that's the that's right,
Yeah.
the settlement area, right.
So we don't have minimums for that?
No, there's no regulation. They could come right up to your, within a foot of your property.
Well, that sounds like something that clearly needs to change.
So, well, he listened. That's surprising because the other thing he told me is, Sue, you can't stop it again. He said, the Premier has said, whenever pits need to be open, need to be open. But we may push the other. CEO McNeely, did you find that?
Under the public session report, scheduled for July the 10th at 6 p.m.
So
Thank you.
That's a point for everybody to come and speak on it, or is that what is the process?
Go ahead, CEO.
So Madam Mayor, yes, Mr. Rouse, the purpose of the public session report, like any item on our consent agenda, is to allow interested members of the public to speak to the report and its recommendations, to ask questions of clarification, or to make statements to township council on the contents of the report, which then council takes that information context and would make a decision.
So the report is filed regarding the ICDL. So you have a report that is that what's happening now?
It would be a report as part of the July 10th agenda. The agenda and the report is available in advance of the meeting, and individuals have the ability to either attend in person and speak to the report, connect virtually to speak to the report, or if you're not able to attend the meeting, either virtually or in person, to provide written correspondence to Township Council, which then forms part of the public record for council's consideration on July 10th.
How does that pertain to the ICDL and ICDL?
Report is missed.
Oh, that is, so,
Report is something I see on.
so is that the day you vote on?
Council will give direction to staff, they will either accept it, report, refuse the report, or give direction to staff.
And if you accept it, that means there will be an SPL and no pit licenses will go forward from there. Is that correct? For 1 year. For 1
No,
year?
they changed the law, they changed.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, but I have spoken with our lawyer today. Bill 97 has not been passed, and until it is, we're on the past no appeals for a year, and we need to, that's why we need to move forward before Bill 97 goes forward.
So, Mr. Scott is correct. Bill 97 has not been approved as of yet by the legislature. The House sits for another 2 or 3 weeks before their summer recess. Obviously, I don't know how quickly Bill 97 or in what form Bill 97 will ultimately be approved by the legislature. It's anyone's speculation. But the only mechanism today to deal with an appeal would be through the government itself. The minister has the ability to refer ICBL, or there are 2 provisions in the municipal act that will allow the referral to a third party for review, and whether or not council has the mandate, either all or in part, either release the ICBL. So council on the 10th will receive a report with a recommendation. Council at that point in time can return it back to staff and legal counsel for further review. Council can modify the report. Council can turn down the report and make its own decision in the form of a recommendation. But ultimately, it rests with council as to decide what the next steps will be.
Thank you, CEO. Kim, are you on yet? I see Kim's square.
So I'm just gonna finish up.
Sure, go ahead.
And just want to say that, this area has sacrificed enough. There are, obviously, it's one, I don't know if it is or is the one with the most or one of the ones with the most.
We are the 3rd largest aggregate producer municipality in Ontario.
Okay, so, I think the people of this municipality have sacrificed enough. And I think it's time to put a stop, to press pause, and figure out how to move forward in a sustainable way and not destroy our whole.
Thank you, sir. Kim?
Hello, can you hear me? No?
Don't can't hear you, Kim. Did you try the phone?
Yeah, I did. That didn't work either.
Not working, right?
No.
Can you type in the chat, Kim? And we can read it out.
You have my submission.
What she's saying, do you understand what she's trying to do? Cynthia's.
You have my
Say it again.
submission.
You held up, did you hold up a phone?
Andrew read my submission, which is good enough. You have my submission. There
Yes,
you go.
actually, your letter was better. We can hear you over Cynthia's phone.
You have
Both
my
of you can talk.
Okay, that's great. So Andrew read my submission, which is good enough.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, there, just submission. There you go.
Actually, your letter was better. We can hear you over Cynthia's phone.
There's a 13-second delay
That's great. So
between
good enough.
and YouTube.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Is there anything else you want to say?
That's good. That's good.
It's a 13-second delay.
That's good. That's good.
So it's just cycling back and forth.
Bye, Kim. Thank you. Councilors, any comments? Seeing none. Did you, Council Williams? Go ahead.
I just really wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight and giving your perspectives. And it's great to see everyone here. Usually the rooms are very empty, so it's really nice. But sorry, I didn't tell you to say that. But so it's really nice to see people here and engaged. So thank you for tuning this evening.
Okay, thank you. Can I have the motion, please, Councillor Tilly?
By myself, seconded by Councilor Roman, that report number PD 17-2023 was received, and that all comments and correspondence received through the consultation process associated with the zoning bylaw amendment application be returned to staff for further consideration and a future report to council on the disposition of this matter.
All those in favor? Carried. And Councillor Austin, you have the next motion, please?
Move on myself, like my Councilor Rowland, that bylaw number 3413-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on May 29, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time. Behind the pass sign and sealed by the mayor clerk.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you. And Councillor Bowman, please.
Myself and Councilor Oxner, that whereas business before the public meeting is concluded at 7 p.m. Result of being adjourned and council meeting on May 31st at 6 p.m. for special corporate meeting.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you.